Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, pivoters, wherever you are calling in from today. On the lounge, I have the esteemed Rod Roddenberry. Now, Rod and I met at New Worlds last November here in Austin, Texas, and we had the best night, a really memorable evening, and we connected after that, and I asked him to come on the show, and he said yes. For those of you who may not be as educated or as inspired by space, then you may not know who Rod is. Rod is the son of Gene Roddenberry, founder of Star Trek, and he has done some pretty cool things, both for the sci-fi and science worlds. And he's just a really fun human being. So I'm really excited to have him on the show. Rod, thank you so much for being here today.
Absolutely, Sarah. Thank you for having me here. I know we talked about this a while ago, and I'm really excited to be here. And I'm really excited for you and perhaps people out there to ask me some questions that kind of throw me off, because that's always exciting.
Yes. So I was informed before we went live that Rod really loves provocative questions. So if you're watching us live, please go ahead and put in the Q&A. You can chat on any platform, YouTube, LinkedIn, Instagram, X, wherever you're watching from. We should be able to see them here, and we'll answer them as they pop up. After the show,
And to clarify,
make a comment.
And to clarify, I like provocative questions. Doesn't mean I'm going to answer them all.
Right. Yes. So, and be kind in your provocative questioning. There's no need to be rude or mean or anything of the sort. But we do like questions designed to think, maybe challenge the status quo, and anything that's going to help us have some fun.
Yeah, if you've got some harsh, legitimate feedback, I mean, that's good to hear. If it's well thought out, I'll listen to some criticism for sure.
All right. All right. Well, there you have it. The gauntlet has been thrown, and we'll see what people come up with. We'll see if they have the courage to share those provocative questions and comments. But very in line, yes, very in line with our quote: "Our species can only survive if we have obstacles to overcome. You remove those obstacles; without them to strengthen us, we will weaken and die." Captain Kirk. So, the obstacle could be thrown in front of us, and here we are presenting that as the opportunity for us to overcome and get stronger.
And that line itself fits right into the backbone philosophy of Star Trek, which is IDIC, IDIC, which stands for infinite diversity from infinite combinations. And listen, there's many ways to skin that one, but the concept is anything different fuels us and helps us grow as a species, whether it's something you experience different in form, in function, or idea. It is something that allows us to grow. I mean, it's the building blocks of knowledge allow us to grow is essentially what that says.
I love that. I put that up there for everyone to see. And when we talk about the Star Trek philosophy, what's the origin story? Can you share us? I know it's been written about and talked about, but I want to hear from your perspective, the origin story here, and then how that influenced your life and your career ultimately.
Well, you might have to ask it a few times because I'm going to answer a couple of bits because that's a big question. The origin story. So, I was born in 74, which is a long time ago. But Star Trek was obviously on the air even longer. Came on, to the public at 1966. And before that, this gives me a chance to promote my old documentary, Trek Nation, where I interviewed a gentleman by the name of Chris Knopf. And he was a buddy and a writer in Hollywood in the 50s with my father and 60s. And we did an interview with him. So he would tell me about my father. And he said that he remembered being invited by my father to a baseball game. And at that baseball game, my father, all this action was going on. It was the Dodgers. And my father starts pitching him this concept of a dirigible, a blimp, a balloon, with a varied crew kind of going from place to place in the United States, landing and kind of solving problems.
Okay.
And he kind of goes on to express in a bit more detail. And he says, he thinks this was the genesis of Star Trek. And of course, this was long before Star Trek. So that there. And if you actually, we have another podcast called Genealogy or Genealogy. It's not genealogy. I said it wrong. Genealogy. Where we are dissecting a number of the stories written by my father before Star Trek, police stories, westerns, And you can every now and then get threads and characters that you see little glimpses of, maybe Kirk or storylines or the ethics of humanity or those hard questions that you see in Star Trek. It is a very interesting, my father built Star Trek over years of experience, not just in the industry, but of course his life experience, which is its own story. I'll save it for now.
Okay, beautiful. And so how did that influence your life growing up, being surrounded by this philosophy and these stories and this imagination and creativity?
Well, I don't know how PG this is. I'm not going to say anything too crass, but every now and then I might use a colorful term. My head was up my ass for much of my younger life. And by that, I mean, I was a kid. I was interested in being a kid. I was playing. I only cared about what was in front of me. I only cared about myself. I was privileged for the most part in the sense that nothing was really that rough in terms of my life or my parents' life. So as a kid, I didn't appreciate Star Trek. As a kid, I watched Star Wars, Dukes of Hazzard, Knight Rider, these fairly, I don't want to call them all one-dimensional because I don't want to insult any of them, but sometimes a little bit more one-dimensional storylines with a good guy and a bad guy. I didn't really understand Star Trek until I was much older. And those of you who have heard me speak before have said, no, not this story again. But yes, it wasn't until I was a bit older and started to get a bit more mature that I started to pay attention. And of course, it wasn't until my father passed away that I really became sort of raw and open to what this whole Star Trek thing was. I wasn't oblivious to what it was. I mean, I'd seen a bit of it, but I didn't get it. And I would say from the age of 17 on was when I started to get it. And I'm still trying to get it.
Aren't we all with everything in life, right?
Yes.
As you started to get it at age 17, and obviously that's around the age that we're about to graduate high school and go out into the big open world and do things. How did that influence the choices that you made in terms of what you did next?
It's a great question. So during high school, I goofed off. I was more interested in social life and chasing girls and driving cars than I was in my homework. So I didn't get the best grades. It improved. And when my father passed away, it certainly, I mean, obviously, it was a big shift. And, I want to say I don't believe in life-changing moments, but if anything, that was certainly a life-changing moment where I can't say for certain, but, I started to just question more things like, okay, now what? What does this all mean? And so my grades improved when I went to college. I wasn't great with tests and grades, but I found a college that had essays and divisional exams and a different sort of way of teaching, or at least I guess writing papers on kids and telling you your performance.
Right.
You didn't get a letter grade, but this is their strengths and these are your weaknesses. Anyhow, I chose classes in college that I wanted to take. And believe me, they were astronomy, cosmology, phonology. I did, I tried calculus 3 different times. That was a tough one. Physics, I think I made it to 103, but that was a tough one. And I did some photography. I became very interested in space. And to give my mother and father credit, they got me a telescope, I think in 11th grade, which would have been 1990 or 1991. And they had Sally Baliunas of the Harvard Smithsonian, who worked at the Griffith Observatory in Los Angeles. She came down and gave me my first tutorial on the telescope. And then she gave me a job one summer to go operate the 60-inch telescope up there. And I did fall in love with space. I did fall in love with the universe and all that, because I found it was, for me, it was the science where you could always just wonder and be creative. It was a science where they get data, and then you have to use your imagination on some level, as well as logic and reason, to interpret what that data meant. And by no means did I get much further in that. I had a surface knowledge of astronomy and a very basic physics, but I was fascinated by it. I always have been. I still am. But I am pretty much just an armchair quarterback when it comes to that stuff right now. So I don't even know what the question was. But anyhow,
how did it inform your choices for how you chose school and your career?
Yeah, I get lost on my story sometimes. I did much better in college. I enjoyed what I was doing. I was passionate about my studies. But then an opportunity called Earth Final Conflict, which was a concept my father based. It was a concept based on one of my father's stories came up, and the opportunity to work in Toronto on the show and happened. And I said, you know what? I'll take a year off and I'll come back. And as so many of us know, when you take a year off from college, you rarely come back. And that's what happened. I am a college dropout. I went to Toronto, I worked on the show, and I learned a great deal about the industry, pros and cons. And that kind of started me. So how did it inform me? It informed me by, just realizing that knowledge is important. And that was, I began to recognize and hear things about the world. And it wasn't just all about me or all about my bubble. And I became more interested in that. And then, of course, watching Star Trek, as I began to do after my father passed away, after listening to fans say that it inspired them, that it made them believe in a better future, that it was hopeful, that it had storylines that made you think. I started to do all that. So I came backwards into Star Trek. I really fell in love with the power of it because it had depth, it had meaning, and made you consider different points of view. And I became very proud of Star Trek and very proud of the messaging. And it informed me that was the messaging I wanted to carry on in my own way, whether it was through a television show, a family foundation. I had an adventure group at one point. I wanted to share experiences so that people could see things in different ways and hopefully grow from those experiences.
Beautiful.
Sorry, that kind of answers your question.
No, it does. Absolutely. Because I think, especially when we talk about family legacies, right, there's often this kind of running away or not so interested in and then coming back to experience that often happens. Because when we're kids and teenagers, we don't like anything thrust on us, even if it's something that we do like, but we'll never admit it, right? And so
100%.
it's
I'm still not a golfer.
You're still not a golfer? Was your father a big golfer?
They tried to get me into golf. I'm sure it'll happen one day. I'm just not there. Sorry, Mom, Dad.
Every time I do a swing at the golf ball, I typically stand up too much. And so I do a lot of air swings. It's really very entertaining for other people. And it kind of hurts my shoulder. So it's not something that I do very frequently.
Yeah. Maybe soon enough I'll get there. Anyhow.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. And I agree with you. I mean, I grew up watching Star Trek with my mom as a little girl, and I would always ask so many questions, and it always inspired me to be curious. And well, why don't we have that now? And just you start to connect the dots with some of the things you learn in science. And I was just telling someone earlier today, I still remember my first telescope that I got, and going out on the lawn and looking through it, and identifying the stars. I grew up in the back room of the seminar hall at the planetarium in Chicago. My mom would go and take a class, and I'd be back there, and maybe I'd fall asleep because it was late at night. But that what you said about bringing the curiosity and imagination into science, I think that no matter what the science is, that's a crucial element that often gets forgotten about.
Yeah. And I didn't mean to say that other sciences didn't have that aspect, but that's where I figured that out, is through astronomy, that you can bring your imagination into it. And that was fun.
Yeah. And I like that you said it's figuring it out, and it's almost giving yourself permission to, because we can get locked into these narrow boxes of it must look like this, physics, linear, logical process that we need to follow, or chemistry, biology, right? We can get really nitty gritty and narrow. But we can also invite that curiosity and wonder back in, no matter what the science is, but certainly when it comes to space.
Yeah, if the data points say one thing and the imagery says something else, now you've got to wonder, why is that? And that's, I think, where the fun happens. Definitely take some knowledge and some research and all that, but that's where the fun can happen, I think.
Yes, absolutely. I also appreciate how you mentioned that, you don't have to be a physics major or excellent at mathematics in order to be interested in and or involved in space, because I think that's a common misconception people have. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, we also live in the day and age where information's a click away. And by no means am I saying that you can become an astrophysicist by watching YouTube videos, although who knows? I don't think that's exactly possible, but
Right.
we're getting closer and closer to things like that.
Yes, and there's more accessible shows. I know Dr. Graham Lau has Secret Life of an Astrobiologist, and breaking down some of these very big esoteric or etherical type questions that are so gargantuan most people's minds can't wrap around it, and making it more palatable and tasty for people to snack on, right? And I think that's really important so that we can continue to get each generation interested in and continue exploring these areas.
I should say specifically when it comes to astronomy, Carl Sagan was my gateway drug. As a young boy, when I was much younger, with Knight Rider and all that stuff, I also watched the Cosmos videos at nauseum. My parents got me one of those small, it was a CRT TV with the built-in VCR.
Okay.
And I used to sit in the bathtub and have that like teetering on the edge of the bathtub, just watching videos. I would just bring it around with me places and watch Carl Sagan videos. So that helped me out quite a bit too.
I love that. Yeah, Carl Sagan is definitely a name I'm familiar with. We had books and all sorts of things in the household, and so it's really interesting to see all the different touch points, right, into this space. Literally, I love puns, so that was very much intended, where we can, all roads lead to Rome, and it can come from many different avenues, including things like film and movies and the arts. And both of those help us to not only educate the public about these bigger concepts that, we want to convey without everyone needing a big degree in astronomy or physics, but it also is the human story. It's our narrative of adventure and exploration and ingenuity.
I love where you're going with this, and not to assume I know exactly, but at least I love where I think you're going with this. Or at least I'm taking it somewhere. Well, listen, when it comes to STEM education, right? Science, technology, what is it? Something mathematics. I fully believe in a traditional education, but I do think that is only half of the equation. I really do. I think there is something to, and I have to be broad about this because I don't know the right way to say it, but life experience. Some of us are very fortunate, and we travel at a younger age or when we're able to. And I think it's the unique experiences, meeting new people, whether you start in your small town and move to the city, and then move to another city and move to a state, et cetera, and then maybe to another country. The more and further you go, the more uniqueness you see in our world, whether it's animals and plants, people, colors of people, ideas from different people, views of the universe or religion or politics, things that you haven't experienced before. The more you grow, and I would use the word better yourself as a human being. I know that word can be triggering, but I mean not better than someone. I just mean better than you once were. And I think that is essential to education. I'll use the word education as a species. And I'm going to make this gross analogy here that I'm sure, hopefully I'll get some good questions on it that put me in my place. If you have a dog and you have a backyard and you have a fenced off backyard and you keep your dog in the backyard its entire life and you don't give it any experience, when someone knocks on that door, the gate, the dog's going to bark out of fear because it's never heard that before. And perhaps if someone jumps over and comes through it, they're possibly going to attack because it's scary. They've never seen this before. Right. Now, if you socialize that dog with the world, places around it, experiences with children, other dogs, big dogs, small dogs, people, blah, 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 noises, sound, everything, they become more aware, they become more experienced, and in theory, are more acceptable of these things. I hate to call us as humans dogs, but I have dogs. I love dogs. Maybe it just works for me. I think the more we experience things, the more we put ourselves into uncomfortable positions, things that we don't know, that we haven't experienced, the better we are as people, because we will know now the second time we will know how to respond better the second time with that experience. And that's I think knowledge. I think that is ultimate knowledge. STEM is important. I'm not saying get rid of it. I'm just saying that's only half of it, in my opinion.
Yes, I would agree with you. It's that applied knowledge to real world situations, putting it to use, right? What good is the knowledge that you've gained from a book if you're not actually using it? The book might as well sit on your shelf unread, right? We have to
Yeah.
actually see these things in action and test and all of those things. So, and I really love the analogy with the dog too, because it's also the same with children, right? Young children. If you don't socialize children with other children, there's always those stories of like the first time they're kindergarten, someone takes their toy, so they hit them, and we have to, teach them the ways of kindness and sharing and all of these things, right? But they don't know that inherently. And if you never teach them that, you'll have a pretty quickly in your hands this adolescent or young adult that is not very nice to be around, right?
Yeah, I tried the analogy first by saying lock your kid in the backyard for years and years, but apparently that didn't go over so well.
That probably doesn't work the same way, yeah.
No, but it fits right with Star Trek. For me, that's the backbone of Star Trek. Humanity has come together, finally. We realize it's our diversity and our uniqueness that makes us grow and evolve as a species. We are now out in the universe or in the galaxy trying to find new life forms that don't just look different, but see the universe in a different way that can share a perspective that we haven't heard before, because that is something new that we don't necessarily have to agree with it,
right.
But it gives us a new data point to either incorporate portions of it into our own or to ignore or whatever, but we have that data point. And now let's go find another data point and let's just fill up. Knowledge is the most important thing in life.
Absolutely. I have a sticker on the back of my notebook that says only the educated are free. And that is, when you learn these different perspectives, you have the ability of choice to choose. And I love that you highlighted we don't have to agree with or adopt fully, but we get a data point and then we can test it, right? We can become a scientist of our own reality and of life. And the more data points that we have, the better outcomes and hypotheses we can test, right? We can experience more.
Yeah. And trust me, I'm proof you don't have to be that smart to get these data points.
Oh my gosh, I love it. Well, you know what? It's not about, again, what you learn in school. It is about being willing to do the hard thing, having the discipline to try something new and stick with it, even if you feel like you don't know what you're doing or you're not that good. We live in this world where people want instant gratification, like literally Instagram is that, right? We want it now. We want it yesterday. And I still remember the dial-up days, right? Having to hit the button and like go get a snack and all the weird noises. The web page probably took 2 minutes to load. Now if it's 10 milliseconds too slow, we complain. And I'm sure. Go ahead.
Uber Eats, Amazon, Instacart, everything delivery, next day delivery. I am also, listen, I'm standing on my soapbox, but I want to let you know that I'm also as terrible in these areas as maybe many of us are.
I mean, I use apps too, right? That's the world we live in, but it's about adapting and evolving. And again, who knows where technology is going to be in another 10 years. I always like to talk with people about some of the things we saw in Star Trek when it first came out, and over the years, now that is our day-to-day reality, right? Bluetooth technology, a lot of the communications, some of these things that seem so far-fetched, and now it's taken for granted. So, what's next? And that should be the exciting thing.
Absolutely. And I am excited. And we can get into AI. I don't know a ton about it. I think I have all the same concerns everyone else does, but I'm excited for it. And of course, I can use the word terrified. It's not that's going to take over and blow us up. I mean, that is a whole different thing that I don't have enough knowledge. I'm not going to get into. There are the real issues happening right now. Where are these going to be taking jobs? And the answer is absolutely yes, they are.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's too much technology too soon for us. I don't know if we are ready. The whole concept in Star Trek of non-interference, the prime directive. Orville did a great episode, I think season 3, where they showed what happened when they visited a planet too early and introduced new technology when they weren't ready. And not to ruin it, but of course it destroys the entire civilization. Are we ready for this kind of technology now? Our intellect is evolving far faster than our ethics and morals. Well, I should say our technology is evolving much faster than our intellect. And that is a concern.
That is a
I
concern.
don't think we're ready for this. In a perfect world, in the Star Trek universe, having AI that can create art and music and write scripts and do is wonderful, because we have the ability to control the atom, and we have the replicators. And so now it is not necessary for anyone to work for a living, because you need food, you got a replicator. You don't have a replicator, I'll replicate you a replicator. You need education materials, you need whatever. We have everything we need. So it goes back to an artist who wants to sing or paint or write. They now do that for themselves and their friends and whoever.
Right.
So there's no longer a threat of a lost job. But we are not there yet, clearly. And that is a real thing coming up. And it's going to
Absolutely.
happen. There's no stopping it. It's going to happen. So
Yeah,
what are
I
we
mean,
going
it's
to do?
already here. I was having a conversation with someone earlier today. It's almost insidious in how it's shown up, because if it's not something, if you don't work in tech or you don't use certain tools, but I'll give you an example in business aviation, dispatching an aircraft, scheduling software. I remember 15 years ago, people were really, really worried that this software and this technology and these flows were going to take away the scheduler's job. It hasn't. So there will be an adaptation. There will still be things that we need to be doing, but our jobs will change. Just like on a
Yeah.
lot of aircraft, we're not turning wrenches necessarily as much to fix them, but we are computer software engineers, right? To put in new code and to do things in that way. So I don't know how quickly it's going to evolve. It's going to definitely grow much faster than some of us desire, some of us are ready for. But hopefully we can have more uh, openness to it. And I like what you said about with the art and the creation, because I had this conversation yesterday from an artist perspective. I think it helps you become more creative because you can get new starting points. It's not like, oh, I'm going to put in this prompt, I'm going to claim it as my own. No, but put in a prompt, see what that inspires in you, and then you go and do your magic, and that can then further evolve from there.
Yeah. Yeah. My son loves ChatGPT, and he asked it recently to create a Star Trek story. Uh, I forgot how many words, 1,000 words, 500 to 1,000 words. And it freaking nailed it.
Oh yeah, it's so
I mean,
great.
it nailed it. And I know there is the concept that AI pulls its data from everyone else's work. So there's I don't want to say it a debate. It's the truth. Um, and so it's not necessarily completely original. It is taking these story
Right.
structures and concepts and ideas from other people, but it still created an incredible Star Trek story, to the point where it's not just about sci-fi, but it's about humans meeting an alien race, and there being a misunderstanding. And before war is about to happen, they realize it's a misunderstanding, and it's all about communication, and they make peace
Mhm.
in the end. I mean, that is a Star Trek story,
Yeah.
and I am. It's a damn good story.
Yeah. Well, you can argue as well that, I mean, do we really have original thought anymore? Because if I'm creating a poem, where does that poem come from? It's coming from my lived
Sure.
experience, something else I've read, something I watched, right? Someone said something, it sparked an idea, and I'm pulling from my data points. Maybe my memory is not the exact what I experienced, but I'm still doing the same thing, just in a much more raw and unrefined way, because our memories also
Yeah.
change every time we access them. So that is another thing to
Fair
consider,
point.
right? Yeah.
Fair point.
I do have a question from someone who's watching who wants to know what your thoughts are on the direction of the newest Star Trek content, the Paramount shows and the J.J. Abrams movies.
J.J. Abrams movies, I absolutely love. I mean, I do love the first one, certainly the best, 2009. In fact, in the first 5 minutes, I was tearing up and crying, because, that's a very powerful scene with
Yeah.
Kirk's father. Um, the new Star Trek, I am very proud of it. I am one of many executive producers. I am not on the inner circle of people who are creating the stories and developing them, from birth. But I am sort of one removed, where these things come across my desk, and Trevor Roth, my producing partner, and I and our entire team, we review these things and we send in our thoughts. And there's a lot of great minds. Here's what's different: the Star Trek from the next gen DS9, Voyager, Enterprise days. it was a different time, obviously, and there was a little bit of a sentiment from those higher up that we are the producers, and we don't necessarily take suggestions from these silly fans. But at the same time, they did have a script submission policy through many of the years, but it had to be submitted through the proper channels, and it had to be the right format. So it wasn't. I don't want to make it sound like they didn't listen to any fans and they hated all fans and all that. But there was a bit. They wanted to keep the gap. The people who are working on Star Trek now grew up with Star Trek. They love Star Trek for various reasons. Their reasons may be different than mine, but still, they love Star Trek. So they get Star Trek in their own way. And so they truly want to be part of the next Star Trek incarnation. And we're in it now. And I am very proud. Discovery is going to have its 5th season and last season. And that is, I think we can say publicly now, I think it airs April 5th. I have seen it. And let me just say, Discovery is an incredible journey. Each season is incredibly different from the next. It was a learning curve in the sense that they brought these incredible characters together, and these characters really had to grow because they were kind of figuring out, what does Star Trek now look like? And seasons 3, 4, and 5, I think, are phenomenal in terms of what I like in Star Trek. See, I like the Star Trek that is less exciting for people. I like the Star Trek, like I just described, where it's more about not fighting the alien, but finding out and learning about the alien. Sure, there's got to be tension, and they say in story there has to be conflict. Well, conflict can come from the nacelle exploding or not working right. I mean, conflict can be in many forms. It does not have to be two people fighting each other. But anyhow, I like the slower, more thoughtful Star Trek where we get to learn that our enemy is not really our enemy. We can now empathize with them, see it from their point of view, maybe help correct the situation, and then we're all peaceful together. I mean, that's what we need here on Earth. And that's, I think, the backbone of what Star Trek was always meant to be. So in season 4 and 5 in particular, you see a lot of that. You see a lot of, why are we fighting? Or is this enemy a true enemy? Is it a threat? In fact, in season 4, I highly recommend, not to give too much away, there was an AI predicament. And the question was, we have this opportunity to destroy this AI because it could be a threat to us. But is it sentient? Do we give it a chance to be sentient?
Yeah.
If it is sentient, will it see us as a threat? And they had to deal with that. And they did it, I thought, in the most Star Trek, most beautiful way ever, as well as a whole other life form. Anyhow, Strange New Worlds is phenomenal. Lower Decks is, everyone loves Lower Decks. I always talk about Prodigy. Prodigy, for me, it is a very, I don't want to say simple show. It is not simple. It is very pure in its Star Trek. Even though it is done from a completely different point of view, you've got this ragtag band of misfits from a prison planet who come together and find a ship and have to learn what it is to be Starfleet. If anyone feels overwhelmed, sorry, I'm going on quite a bit now, about how do I get into Star Trek, I would say Prodigy. Even though people hear it's a kid's show, it is not a kid's show. It's kids and adults. It is the introduction into Star Trek, and it has got great science fiction in it. Highly, highly recommend it. It's currently on Netflix. And if I may say to everyone out there listening, please watch it. Please promote it. It's got 2 seasons. We really want a 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th, but it's had a rough sort of go at because it wasn't put out there in, I think, the way that it should have been. And so it didn't get the audience that it should have. And I'm leaving a show out, I feel like. Oh, and Picard. Picard, well, everyone loves the Next Gen cast. So, of course, having Picard out there is sort of a nice send-off for all of them, and a blowing a kiss to the Star Trek fans. We know you're there. We love you.
I love that.
I think that's, yeah.
Beautiful. Well, I just finished another show, so I was thinking about what to watch next. So now I know Prodigy is on the list.
Orville. I'm not one to necessarily promote a non-Star Trek, but again, anyone listening, Seth MacFarlane created a live-action science fiction TV show called The Orville. Many of you know about it, but many of you don't. And it is its own thing. I don't want to take credit away from his team, but it is as beautifully Star Trek as Star Trek can be. A
Okay.
lot of thought-provoking issues come up, and great science fiction with just enough humor.
I love it. All right. Well, we'll put that on there too. So that it looks like I've got 2 shows now on the list. My partner's going to be very happy. He tries to save all the space and sci-fi shows so that we can watch them together, but I often fall behind. So this is going to be exciting.
Life is busy right now. It's hard. It's easy to fall behind.
It is. And
Very.
sometimes you have to make, decisions and prioritize, where you're going to spend your time. And sometimes I don't want to stare at a screen because I've been staring at a screen all day already, right? So then I choose to go outside, stare at the stars if I can see them. I'm very lucky where I live in Austin. There's not too much light pollution. And so whenever I get that opportunity, I'm always looking up. So that's really nice.
I'm in LA. We don't have stars up. We have stars down, and I don't want to look at either here, at least.
No, that is definitely not something you see there. I have another comment from someone saying that they really dug Genesis 2 from the 70s, and it was the first time they saw a matriarchal society on the screen.
Yeah. I wasn't around for that. I was just a wee little thing.
Yes.
But watching those are fun ones. I think you can find them. Well, I don't know if they're on YouTube anymore. But of course, Quester, but Genesis 2 was another concept that my father, it was basically a pilot show that was going to be developed into more, but didn't get the numbers it needed for whatever reason and never saw the light of day in terms of a series.
Right.
So yeah, and then that's what I was talking about earlier, where my father, these inklings of being more forward thinking, he had those in his other concepts. And granted, that did come after Star Trek, but whatever. There's a thread that goes through. And while my father, by no means do I want to paint him as a perfect human being, and nor did he think of himself in that way. He was just as flawed as the rest of us. It doesn't mean you can't see the future or envision the future in a positive way, even if your own actions don't always live up to those higher standards.
Yes. I wrote something down yesterday, actually, as I'm doing this daily Stoic challenge. And what they were saying is you are good inside, even if you have done bad things, even if you have not done the habit and you maybe lashed out in anger instead of being kind that time or multiple times. It doesn't make you bad because the action was bad. And so it's, going back to the philosophy and being intentional, right? I think that's really what it is, and building the awareness and seeking to understand both yourself and the other person.
I don't want to, you know what, I'll still save it. One of your questions, you just kind of helped me with maybe my response to them, but you've got it on your list. I'll have it in my back pocket when you're ready. But I like what you just said. Basically, I think being able to look at yourself and be honest with yourself, and it's hard to think about that time when you were rude to the person, or you yelled at someone, or you were mean, or you lost your temper. That is a hard thing to do and to really dig into, and maybe not beat yourself up about, but really try to observe it and analyze it and see it from all points of view. And then at the end of that, forgive yourself. I think if you're able to fully look at everything, see where it went wrong, think of ways it could handle better, even if it is a day later, an hour later. And of course, if you can make amends and apologize, absolutely. But then obviously you don't want to beat yourself up every moment. So you forgive yourself and say, I'm going to try harder next time. I think that's a pretty crucial thing for humanity.
Yes, absolutely. Looking in the mirror and seeing what's there clearly, right? We often try to we all have stories about the things that we have done or have not done. And those are what hold the power, right? And it's also why Star Trek is so powerful, because it's this series of stories that can show us what's possible. And if we do this one action versus this action, right? And so being able to do that on yourself, that's where it starts, right? We have to be able to accurately self-reflect and make more intentional choices with each practice of it, and not expect that we watch a podcast one time, or we read a book one time, or we do the thing one time, and then all of a sudden now we're experts. I think that's what most people hold themselves to. And so another Stoic philosophy is strict with self, tolerant with others, and so we are strict in the sense that this is the ideal we want to be. And so we just keep returning back to it. But if someone else doesn't live up to our ideal, we don't hold it against them because that's not their ideal, that's ours.
I wrestle with that often. But also releasing the guilt, I think, is important because I think
Yes.
many of us can, and dare I say, are filled with guilt in one form or another. And you got to do the self reflection and then release. I think that's important because if you keep that guilt in, it's going to be harder for you to look at yourself the next time it happens, and harder and harder.
Right. And then that guilt, if we hold that then turns into the shame, right? And
Shame,
Brene Brown
yeah.
has a lot on that. And guilt can be helpful as a data point so that we don't do things again. But when we hold it and we don't process, that's when it turns into shame, which is not helpful.
Incredibly well said.
I think I have that correct.
Yeah,
But
yes.
what, in your experience, what do you find has helped you in releasing some of the guilt around stories? Have you found something to be helpful?
A thing to be helpful. I don't know if there's a thing. Well, I'm going to ruin one of your questions.
You can
ask a
go
question?
into the question now. Yeah, which question do you want to answer?
Only because it's and okay. So one of your questions is, what is your superpower?
Yes.
Not to tell you what your question is to me, but that's a hard one. And I didn't have an answer for it, and I don't even know if this is a great answer. And it certainly doesn't mean I am an expert at it either. And we all think of ourselves in different ways than we really are. I think I have the ability, a strong ability, to be very self-aware, not always at the right moment, but hopefully fairly shortly after, and not too far after. But I can hear myself usually after I say something or reflect on a situation, and then I don't want to say I'm so empathetic, but see it from another point of view and go like, oh crap, I totally see now. I didn't think of it then, but I can totally see how that sounded this way or how that made someone feel. I'm not saying I can do it every time. I'm not saying I'm better than anyone. I am saying that I am pretty good at that. Not great, pretty good. And how to release the guilt, honestly, is to make amends. I mean, to go to the person and own up and say, I you know what? I had no idea. I completely meant it in this way, but you're right. I didn't even think about it that way. You're right. I purely just assumed and did it this way. And I'm sorry. Owning up is actually a strength, I think.
Yes.
If you can recognize your faults and apologize, I think that makes you a stronger person, not stronger than the other person,
right,
but stronger in yourself. To have that ability to see from multiple points of view, recognize the error. You can still recognize that you meant it this way. That's fine.
Right.
But recognize the error, that it was perceived in a different way, and that's truly acceptable, and have that conversation. That is the one of the strongest things you can do, and that it releases a tremendous amount of guilt. And you might have someone who says, still, screw you, I don't even want to know you anymore. And sadly, that is a result of the situation, but you still went to them and you still acknowledged the situation, their feelings, your feelings. And that's life.
Very well said. When we release the need to be right, then we can understand. And what you said just there was really powerful, acknowledging the other person's point of view, because ultimately we just want to be seen and heard, right? We want to feel understood. But when we're so busy defending our position, I was a very good defender for many, many years, and probably still sometimes fall back into that. I can even remember in some cases, like in my mind going, Sarah, you're actually wrong. Like, stop. But I couldn't control myself. I, like you, have learned how to maybe not in the moment, but go back after. And at first it was scary to go back and admit that I was wrong or that I made a mistake. But now that I can do that, and I do that, it's much more powerful. My relationships have improved. It also means that that person and I, if we get into another situation where there might be an assumption or misunderstanding, we're less likely to have it escalate to this really hard level to manage, because we have that previous experience to draw on and go, oh, wait a second, maybe this is what they're trying to say. And so we could communicate on a better level.
Yeah. Well, I perfect. Yeah. And again, I want to clearly say, I don't want to present myself as the master of this. I am not. I recognize it. I think I do it at times fairly well in terms of what I just said. But by no means am I trying to say that, hey, I got all the answers. I do it all the time. I'm perfect.
No, very well said. And that's with any of our superpowers, right? Because very often our strengths can also become our weaknesses. When we don't have the other perspectives to kind of counterbalance that, or if we get too narrow and focused into something. So I really love that. I do have a question here. Rod, what is your favorite fan film? I love this Star Trek Continues series, but Prelude to Axanar was incredible.
I mean, to be fair, I haven't seen that many fan films. I've seen a number, at least in the old days. Star Trek things. God, it is hard to pick a favorite. I mean, Star Trek Continues was incredibly well done. In terms of Star Trek fan films that I have seen, I would say that is my favorite. I found the attention to detail, the sets, the designs, the colors, how colors pop, the harsh shadows that you saw in the original series. They worked all of that into it. And then the stories were very Star Trek. So to answer your question directly, I will say Star Trek Continues is currently, out of what I've seen, which is a number of them, my favorite Star fan film. If you're referring to fan films in general, I haven't seen that many. I've seen some fun Star Wars ones. The technology today, trooper stuff that you see on YouTube.
Oh my gosh,
it's absolutely hilarious. But,
it's so funny.
Yeah,
like the ones that they are like dancing, or they mouth over what they're actually saying in something else. It's I agree with you. I've seen some really entertaining ones.
Some good stuff, and it's going to get better. I mean, I love the idea that the window between fan films and Hollywood is getting more and more narrow. I mean, there's quality content coming from YouTube, which fans or just non-Hollywood people are making. That's freaking top notch. And I'm excited for that gap to get smaller and smaller, and then in theory be non-existent, where you can make your own TV series at home, fairly high quality. You'll need talent.
Yes.
But talent is something that can be learned in terms of acting.
I love that. That's actually in line with one of the other questions that was asked about. Did you ever have to fight to protect the integrity of Star Trek in any of the shows you worked on? For example, studio notes that went against the original intention of the original series. So that's the question. And then how does that tie into, if we close this gap and we start to have more of these fan films and productions, what are your thoughts on how that might stream off into other areas that are not in line with the original philosophy and what you believe Star Trek to be?
First of all, I mean, those are all excellent questions. That's a great question. The short answer is no, I haven't fought for anything that I strongly disagreed with yet. There hasn't been anything that has been so abhorrent that I fought for it. There are things that I certainly disagree with, absolutely. But I will also say my vision of Star Trek is very narrow. As I expressed earlier, my Star Trek is not fighting the enemy, but learning about the enemy, trying to understand the enemy, empathizing, and in theory, in the ultimate scenario, finding peace with the enemy and even becoming friends. Those kinds of stories are the ones that I think are Star Trek when they're at their best. The perfect example in the original series is the Devil in the Dark. That's the Horda, the rock monster. Mm-hmm. And that is, of course, the story where it's killing humans. Enterprise is brought in to save the day. We first try to kill it, but then someone brilliant named Spock says it's intelligent. Let's communicate with it. And of course, in the end, we find out that we've been killing its young. Its eggs are the crystals are its eggs, and we have been destroying those, or at least using them. And it's a mother protecting its young. And who is the devil in the dark?
Yeah.
Who's the bad guy? We are in that scenario. And so I do love those stories that really make you think and throw a twist in and give you empathy for the bad guy.
Right.
There is a lot of Star Trek out there that is good guy, bad guy, and a little bit. It shows us. It shows us. So Next Generation is what I was brought up with, and I always felt that showed us who we could be one day. We're not. It's not a military force. Yes, it is an organized a group with ranks and all that, but the captain doesn't run that through authority. He runs that through respect. He's earned respect from his crew. He's brought his crew together because they are experts in their positions. And he listens to those experts. He becomes informed from his experts. And then, as a captain, makes that decision together. I'm not saying things should be perfect all the time. It's just not ruling by authority. It's not being a ruler.
Yes.
And there are Star Treks out there where it is a little bit more, I am the captain, hear me roar, do as I say, not as I do. Those kinds of things. Not too bad. And the stories that kind of show us more where we are today. And today, I don't think we're at our best. I like the stories that show us where we could be, or the series that show us where we could be. And there are some Star Treks out there that I think don't necessarily show us where we could be. They show us where we are. And people like that, by the way, because you can identify with a character that loses its temper. Right. You can identify with these raw characters who have emotion and blow up or want to defend or, these sorts of things. And I get that. I truly, truly get that. And there's nothing wrong with that. And that is a version of Star Trek. It's not my version of Star Trek. So are there things I disagree with? Absolutely. Wholeheartedly, I say that is not my Star Trek. I will even say that is not Roddenberry Star Trek. But is it Star Trek? Yeah. I don't think there's anything that I've seen that is so far off the rails that it is, it insults every Star Trek fan out there.
That's really that's a great perspective to take on that. And that also ties into how you said you hope that this gap between Hollywood and people and other studios with the technology being able to create shows and series without having to go through that old traditional path and need to necessarily spend a whole lot of money or know a specific someone in order to get in. So for those people out there that are creating their own films, producing, editing, writing shows, what advice would you have for them as we kind of go into this next decade of technology and film and production and TV series?
I don't know if I have certainly the best advice, and it definitely depends on what you're doing. If you're just wanting to create your own stuff on YouTube and you're a whiz at the computer and CG, I mean, obviously, my number one piece of advice, and again, this might bite me or you in the butt, but there's no one way to do anything anymore. 20 years ago, before YouTube and all that, sure, there was sort of a one way that television shows were made, and you couldn't do this, you couldn't do that. We all know now with so many different formats, you can kind of do anything you want. I am completely aware that as technology becomes, more advanced and more pervasive, and as people can develop content in their homes, people are going to take characters, stories, Star Trek, and they are going to do things that might be offensive even. And frankly, I know that's happening. I'm not going to try to stop it. I'm not going to watch it. Probably won't acknowledge it. Of course, if something's done in good humor and jest and fun, by all means, do that. I am not telling people to create Star Trek because legally you are not allowed to create Star Trek. But again, as this gets more and more narrow, it's going to be harder and harder for that to be fully policed. And people are going to do things. It's the same thing with your likeness. We've got our political figures. We've got famous stars. We're going to see more and more faces online, on screen, that are saying things that are not those people, that are counter to who they are. And we can be angry at it. And we can say, don't do it. It's going to be done. Yeah. It's going to be done. And that's why I want to go back to, or let's see if that's why we talked about education earlier. I think that That life experience gives you a greater sense of the world and ethics and respect for humanity and other people, and the fact that your actions do make a difference. And while I'm not saying everyone has to do the right thing all the time, everyone should definitely have fun. But unfortunately, we live in a world where people see things and they believe them. So be aware that what you're doing can have a larger impact negatively on the world or your I guess group as a whole. And it's we need to grow up as a species.
Yes.
Intellectually, we have a lot of growing up to do to catch up with our technology. A lot.
Yes. It's that ripple effect, right? It's understanding the consequence of your actions, not just in this moment as you're doing it, but afterwards, the impact on the relationships, on, as you said, if you're creating something and it's being viewed online, and people think that it's real, right? We have a lot of fake news and deep fakes and all of these things that are happening. And so that's why AI can be quite scary. And at the same time, it can also be quite exciting, and it can really aid us in many ways when we use it in the correct way, and when we, as you said, we are intellectually mature enough to be able to utilize it as a tool rather than, and the tool is not always a spear, right? It can be many different types of tools.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, honestly, I also know when you're young, you don't think about these things as much. So it's just going to happen. I don't know how to solve it. I don't know if we can solve it. Just hopefully we can just get better and better.
Yes. And I think from my perspective, it does seem that, each generation, the consciousness is expanded a little, the emotional intelligence and awareness, right? The conversations that I remember having when I was in my early 30s and my brother was in his early 20s, I was thinking, man, if my ex-husband had this level of emotional intelligence, maybe we would be able to connect on a deeper level, right? But it was just not his world. It was different. And so it's not that one was right and one was wrong. It was just different. And so each generation, we have new technology, we have new conversations, the narrative shifts. Maybe that series that didn't gain traction in the 70s about a matriarchal society, it probably would gain a lot of traction now, right?
Absolutely.
And so maybe that's a little seed that can be planted for a new show.
Well, two things you said. Emotional intelligence. I mean, I love that term. I really do, because that is exactly what I mean when I say intellectual evolution. I think those go hand in hand. So emotional intelligence is huge, something I am obviously working on every day. We all are, I hope. But we definitely need brought in at a younger age, for real, because I do think that ability to share feelings without elevated emotions, meaning to just convey, hey, when you said this, that made me feel this way. Not only be able to convey it in a calm, rational, peaceful way, but to receive that without feeling attacked.
Yes.
I hear, listen, this sounds kind of stupid to someone. Oh, I hear you saying you feel this way, and I'm sorry, I didn't mean, having that ability to talk about emotions. I don't want to say just men, but men traditionally, I mean, it's gotten better, as you've said, throughout the years, but it's got a long way to go. Our culture and many other cultures, men and women, but need to learn at a younger age. It is okay to have emotions, to convey your emotions, to share. And I think that's another huge point that needs to be brought into education much sooner rather than later. And I can't remember the other one you said, but anyhow. And a matriarchal society. I'm just going to say, I by no means am going to say men better than women. Men have run this fucking planet for a long time. Pardon my language. I know more and more women are getting into higher positions of power. I am all for, not because men are bad and men start all wars, but I am all for a woman anywhere somehow becoming president. Again, I'm not saying it's going to solve everything, but I don't understand why there's such a, still today, women can't do it sort of mentality. I'm not saying we all have that. I'm just saying
Yeah.
It's more prevalent than we all think
Yes. No, I would agree with you. And I would also
or want
very
to
much
admit.
support that as well.
The right woman, by all means. I'm not just saying any woman. A qualified, intelligent woman, by all means.
Yeah. We've got some supporters watching live, very excited about this. Um, and I agree. And it's really not about men are better, women are better. It's about, again, working together, understanding each other. If we can't even understand each other from gender to gender, how the hell are we going to understand another life form that will not look like us, but have intelligence in a different format? And what is intelligence? Is it the way that you solve math problems? Is it being able to hear a different frequency, or,
Emotional
space time?
intelligence?
Exactly. All of these different things. And so when we put all of them together, then that's when we have something really powerful. It's when we're trying to fight one with, physical strength with emotional intelligence, like that's different frequencies, right? So we want to have both, all of them. And
Yes.
one of the things that I wanted to share here is the How We Feel app. This app is incredible. It's at Yale. Mark Brackett founded the emotional intelligence. They do young children studies as well. This app has just been upgraded in the last year or so. I've been using it for 6 months. You can go in and there's 4 colors: high energy, pleasant; low energy, pleasant; high energy, unpleasant; low energy, unpleasant. You can select and then pick what you feel. It describes the emotion. There's a shape. It's wonderful to use with kids. And if you pick something that's more intense, like anger or frustration or sad, right? It gives you some videos, 1 minute, 2 minute, on strategies on how to overcome and process this, to acknowledge it, feel it, process. And it is just so cool. I was having a conversation literally just before we went live with someone about using this app, and I've learned a lot about myself. And so I just really want to encourage everyone, on the heels of Rod's advice for emotional intelligence. This is a great way to de-escalate the intense emotional experience, have understanding, and then be able to communicate. And what I love is they call everyone who uses the app an emotions scientist, because emotions are data points. And when we can look at it from that perspective, we can use emotions as information to help us make better choices. So I just wanted to get up and share this with everyone.
And anyone out there who's hearing this, that and listen, I've had the feelings myself, who feels this hippy dippy BS, my emotions, bull, whatever, that kind of. Ask yourself this: if you are strong, a strong person has the strength to look at those issues within themselves, to acknowledge that they are having an emotion, and to not only acknowledge it, but then seek out help, or at least something that can inform you more on your emotions, and perhaps take steps to understand your emotions better. That is where true strength comes from, not from just staying stagnant in your ways and ignoring new ideas. Explore a new idea, and you will grow from it, and you will become stronger.
Yes, very well said. It reminds me of that quote, that which bends does not break.
Oh,
Right?
beautiful.
So
Yeah.
if we're rigid in this, I need to be strong, then that's when the big storm can upend us. But if we can be flexible and agile, then that's where we get that true strength to survive. You think about water, right? How strong is water? You may not necessarily give it that quality now because it's a liquid, but over the eons of time, how it shaped our earth, right? What it's done.
Yeah.
And so having a new perspective on what strength means to you, and how you can bring that in, is really powerful.
Yeah. Water moves mountains.
It sure does. I have a question here. What advice would you have given your 12-year-old self?
Well, your old self.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Knowing
What?
what you know now and who you were then, what advice would you give?
I wish my answers were simpler. I am who I am today because of my life experience. While I am far from perfect, I like who I am today. So on some level, I would say I wouldn't want to change a thing,
Yep.
including all the mistakes and dumb things I did. But I understand the basis of the question, so I will answer that. I, I, I would I I guess I would say, I'd want to. My father and I had a great relationship from the age of, whatever, I guess, birth to 8, 9, 10. And then I became sort of a preteen teenager and started to get rebellious.
Yeah.
I really wish I had more time with my father and matured enough to, have that adult relationship with him. I don't know. I think everything that we've talked about is what I would want to tell myself then. So I felt comfortable sharing with my father. My son does it to me. This is what's making me think of it. My son is super emotionally intelligent. I mean, listen, he's still a kid in many ways, but he has been brought up in a way, and I give his mother a lot of credit for this. I'll take a tiny bit myself, but not that much. Um, to recognize and step out of a situation and sort of say, what are we talking about? It's okay to do that. He'll counsel me on things and check me on things. And I wish I had his sensibilities at the age of 10 that he has. So I think I would want to sort of just let myself know that being cool and being right and all that is not the most important thing in life. That being a bit more genuine and observing and hearing new ideas was probably the best way to go. I think that's it. I was very fortunate to have a lot of role models in my life. And I eventually listened to a good chunk of them. Again, far from perfect, but I think I turned out fairly okay. Still incredibly flawed, but yeah, I think that's it.
Beautiful. And when we can admit that perfection is not attainable, right? Then that's when we allow ourselves to have progress. It's often in the trying to attain some ideal that can't be met that we experience the frustration and the letdown and disappointment or guilt, all of these things. So it is in fact making you stronger to be able to have that conversation with yourself and that self-reflection. And that is definitely what we need to be teaching in schools. I don't remember, learning from a teacher ever about what an emotion was and how to communicate with someone else clearly and how to, be a good friend or anything along those lines. I think now in some
Yeah.
schools that probably is a class in and of itself. Um, and then the parents didn't necessarily have this toolkit or vocabulary to do it at home. So we were all just kind of bumbling around watching people trying to figure it out through context clues and making assumptions and, not really knowing what we feel. So probably saying something that's not entirely accurate. And we just learned along the way with a lot of bumps and scrapes and bruises. And so the more we can enhance our own experience and understanding, the better we can also articulate that to our children, your
Yep.
nieces and nephews. It doesn't have to be your children. You can also help have these conversations in many different ways for the next generation.
Yeah, well, incredibly well said. My father, I can't remember, granted it was a long time ago, my father or mother saying anything to me about emotions either. And of course, as we know, you can forgive generations as you go further back because that's just the way they were. That's just. But as we said earlier, I don't think we're evolving fast enough in that way. But I do want to quickly say, like, there's something I saw, and I want to do this very quickly because I don't want to take too much time. When I was taking my son on a tour of a school, he was going to kindergarten. We took a tour of the second grade classroom, and the teacher brought up. They were divided into groups of 8 or something. There was one kid who got up in front of the other and said she had glasses, and she goes, "I don't like it when people make fun of my glasses." And the teacher said, "Very good. Who else feels that way?" And of course, some other kid with glasses raised their hand. And this one sat down and another came up. And it was this weird little exercise that made me scratch my head. And it's what I was saying earlier. They were learning how to share their feelings and their thoughts. And of course, the other kids were learning how to receive it without feeling threatened. And I thought, this is incredible to have in a classroom because none of us, or very few of us, were ever taught that. No. And today, our society is so fractured. We are so reactionary, I think, because we have not learned how to express ourselves in a way that is non-threatening, and we have not learned how to receive feedback, how people feel in a way that is non-threatening. Right. And if we somehow incorporated this into every school standard, Would it solve all of our problems? No, but I guarantee you it would help crap ton.
Oh, yes. Yes,
I'm
absolutely.
echoing what you said. I'm echoing what we said earlier. I was like, it can be done. Easy.
Yeah.
I mean, change can happen.
Yes. And you know what? It's also, we have to stop waiting around for the change to happen, because if we wait for the schools to do it, we could be waiting until we're no longer on this plane of existence, right? And so if you're a teacher, if you have children, if you've got anyone else with your partner, like start making this a practice, having conversations, sharing your experiences with each other, right? You don't have to wait for them to teach it at school, teach it at home. I think that's another thing, is too many people are waiting for the change rather than being the change. And so if we can all take that personal responsibility and accountability, we can become the drops in the ocean that become the tidal wave.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is sometimes easier said than done, but
Yes.
any little bit makes a difference. If someone's hearing this, that it feels very hard to them, it's okay. It is hard.
Yes, it is hard.
Just any little bit helps.
And we can do hard things.
I didn't know what this was discussion was going to be about. I'm enjoying this subject matter. I'm thrilled by this. Thank you.
Yes,
I don't know what's going on, but this is wonderful.
Yeah, no, it's amazing some of the things that come up in these interviews, because we obviously we have in here, we're talking about global critical issues, and these are global critical issues, and it's very much related into, how we started in Star Trek philosophy, but we always go down some unexplored paths, and when we're curious and we go exploring, it becomes an adventure. So it's always great to see how the podcast interviews find themselves in.
I would say this is one of the key critical issues, because being able to communicate will allow us to address climate change, politics, religion, all these things much more cohesively, I think.
Absolutely. And especially when we think about intention, right? You were talking about, we try to communicate something, it's received in a way we were not intended. It's the same thing with culture, right? It will be the same when we meet another species, when we meet another intelligent life form, because we ask a question with a certain set of conditions, parameters, assumptions, and the way that they might ask the same exact question, but their meaning behind it is different. What information they're trying to gather is different. And so it really takes a lot of openness and understanding to bridge that gap. I lived in Asia for 13 years, and I can't tell you how many phone conversations I would have been on with someone based in Asia and someone based in the home office in Houston, and realizing they were like flying by each other, saying the same exact thing, but just not getting it. And then I would just rephrase a little bit for both parties, and all of a sudden be like, oh, yes, that is what, yes, okay, great. And then they'd be on the same page. But it was because the intention behind the question was to actually get something different on both sides. One culture being very direct, another culture being a little bit less. And it was just an interesting dance, right? And as soon as I realized what was happening, I was able to be a bridge. And so that's why it's so important, as you said, to get the life experience, to go out and expose yourself to cultures that are vastly different. And if you can't travel, read books. We have so many wonderful technologies now. We have documentaries, we have books. When you're a kid and you read a book, you transport into whatever world you're reading. And anyone who says reading fiction is a waste of time, incorrect, my friends. You learn empathy, you learn culture, you learn so many other things. And so that's how you can start to solve that, even if your funds are maybe not enough to go travel to that place. I got to be very careful, because not everyone can travel, but I did want to say that to the next town, to the next city, anything, everything is a data point. Everything's going to expand your knowledge and perspective. So don't do nothing because you think it can't be done. Do something. Do anything. Yes, I love it. My one of my coaches used to say, "Doesn't matter what you choose; it only matters that you choose." And it can even be choosing a new route home, walking home a different way, going down a different street. Something as simple as that can shift your perspective, or you run into someone that you might not have run into or met if you didn't go that way.
Yeah.
All these little.
Someone said, I got to look up who said it, but they say, do something that scares you every day. And that doesn't mean necessarily jumping out of a plane. That can mean, and I've used the exact phrase you just said, take a different path home, or for a lot of people, it's talk to that person you've always been afraid to talk to.
Yes.
Uh, walk into that situation that you've always been afraid to do. Now, again, these are scary things. So I'm not saying you have to do the most extreme thing right away. Start little, just little bit,
Yeah.
little bit. And again, it's easy to say this. Life is busy. Life is hard. I do not do this every day. I should. I want to. But every time I have a conversation with someone and I say this, it reminds me to try to do something. So
Yeah.
every little thing matters.
Absolutely. There was in this week's, we're in the final week of Space Kind 12. And the homework assignment is one of the extra credit is to ask.
My dog's dreaming. Sorry.
That's okay. My dog often makes appearances on the podcast
too. Sorry to interrupt.
To ask someone that you're intimidated by, or maybe get frustrated with easily, to lunch or dinner, just to have a conversation with them and be curious, ask questions. And I thought that was a great thing, because sometimes, once we get with that person, we're like, why was I so intimidated? Right? Maybe that person doesn't know they're being intimidating, or, and so that will be useful for both of you to have the conversation. I remember the first time someone told me that, I was like, what? Really? Why? At that point I had not so much self-awareness, but once I understood my extreme extroversion could really intimidate an introvert and overwhelm them, then I learned, okay, then there's different ways of being that can connect better in different situations.
Right.
Yeah.
No, that is a scary thing. Talk to someone that you might have opposing opinions or have confrontation with. That is a very scary thing to do.
Yes.
But yeah, if the way you said that, absolutely. And the only thing that can happen is they can say no, and that's fine.
Yes.
And the best thing can happen is they can say yes, and hopefully you can both be emotionally intelligent enough to have a back and forth where people are hearing and listening and empathizing and having good communication.
Yeah.
And if not, hopefully the next one will work out.
Absolutely. And I love just asking, because you don't know if you don't ask.
Yeah. Well, very cool.
Awesome. Well, Rod, I want to ask you, what are some of the dreams that you have for the future of science fiction? And now STEM is being relabeled as STEAM in many circles.
STEAM, yeah.
What are some of I know you're a big proponent of that. What are some of the dreams that you hope start coming in with regards to these two areas?
So my thoughts, dreams on the future of science fiction. I mean, we're at a time and place where I almost think there's too much content out there. I keep hearing about stuff that's been out for seasons and I've never heard of.
Yeah, same.
I guess I can't say that's a bad thing, except for the fact that it's getting harder and harder to connect with people on what they watch. My dream for sci-fi in general is to have more optimistic sci-fi. I mean, I'm sorry, it's kind of what I said earlier. We're in a time and place in society, and granted, we've always been in different places, but of course, I think we need to be inspired. The reason I fell in love with Star Trek was because fans came up to me and said, Star Trek made me believe in myself. It made me believe in the future. It got me out of a terrible situation. It gave me hope for the future. It inspired me to become this or to do that when everyone said I couldn't. I want Star Trek and other shows and every show to do more of that, because I think we need more hope in society. We need to believe in ourselves. I have been very pessimistic at times, and it is, and then I've gone and I've seen someone speak who talks about an optimistic future, and it restores my faith, and I feel good again, and my faith in humanity, I want the content that we watch it's got to be entertaining. Absolutely. There can be a car chase. There can be a hunky man and a sexy one. Fine. Great. But have something that helps promote different points of view without beating you over the head. Hopefully does it in a good way, that it infused into the story, or maybe in some way you don't even know it's happening, because that's the most ideal scenario. That's intriguing. and is still also an adventure. I mean, that's the perfect recipe for me in terms of content. That's what I want sci-fi to do. The dystopian future where we're not getting along, we're still acting. 300 years from now, we're still behaving to each other in the way that we are today. That's not doing anyone any good. It's entertaining, but I would argue, oh God, the old man in me is coming up. I would argue it's doing more harm than good. Can't wait for the internet to get this one. I think it's doing more harm than good, because I think with this kind of content, and it is leaving in our minds this sense of the future is bleak and we are not going to improve. And so in some ways, why bother? Or at least, let's just get rid of the bad guy. And I do not think that is helpful to us right now. I am not saying, internet, that we should get rid of all sci-fi that doesn't show a hopeful future. I'm just saying I want content that inspires and shows what we could be one day, and perhaps ways to get there, and challenges our current way of thinking.
Yeah. And that's, and that ties back to the earlier point of being aware of the ripple effect of what we create can do for the mindset, the psyche, right? And where our attention goes, energy flows. If we get sucked into rabbit holes of only watching these dystopian futures and thinking that nothing will change, so why should I change, or why should I do the right thing, then that's where, we can start to have some really negative spirals that can end up with some really severe outcomes. So it is important as a creator to also think about those implications and, how you're guiding people and their thoughts, especially when we have such a fragmented society and people who need the hope and who need that reminder that there are other ways, there are possibilities, and, it is something that we can do. We can still get there. So thank you for that.
The only way we are going to survive as a species is, as cliche as it is working together. I mean, that's literally the only way.
Yeah. And
so to show us warring and factions and fighting and bickering, we're not going to survive. So I think it's crucial. You said it so beautifully just now.
Thank you.
Need that content. And I don't want to come across as the old person saying violent arcade games are ruining our children's minds, even though I am sort of coming across that way. I'm just saying more balance, maybe, I guess.
Yeah. Well said. So before we sign off, Rod, I want to ask you my last two questions. The first question is, who's on your board of directors, your personal board of directors?
I knew you were going to ask this. All right. So in the interest, I don't want to say in the interest of time, I do have one, but I want to have more. And so I will think about more if I can in the seconds I'm saying the one. I said it earlier, my son. And I know that's sort of the dad thing. Oh, okay, he's pulling the dad card, blah, blah, blah. Everyone's children are fantastic. My son is great for me. He takes after his grandfather. He and I have, I don't want to say very little in common, but the things he's doing at his age and the things that I was doing at my age, completely different. We couldn't be more different. And that is a great thing. It's very challenging, because when I think I get my kid and I'm like, oh, I can do this. No, I can't. He's thinking in a whole different way. Right. And the way he looks at life, the questions he asks, his emotional maturity. Again, he's not perfect, neither am I, but it causes me to reflect often, a lot more than if I had a son who was pretty much exactly like me. So he's also got that innocence of a kid and that simplicity of the world and that lack of knowledge of some of the ugliness, or a lot of the ugliness. And so to have a board and have someone on like him, or to have him on it to turn to and share a scenario situation and get his thoughts, can only improve me and the scenario I'm in, for sure. And sadly, I don't. I'll go into a character. I will say Captain Picard. Honestly, based on the Next Generation, him as a captain there, the way he was written, of course, the way he treated his crew, the way he treated threats and situations, very logically, very analyzing the situation. I really respect that he was able to lead, but he was also able to listen. And I think that, and I would also say Pike, Anson Mount, the Anson Mount's portrayal of Pike. He really came aboard to earn his crew's respect. It wasn't about him just being the leader and authority. He so those two for sure. I wish I had. I know there's going to be someone later when we're done with this. I'm going to be like, yeah, that person. I already said Carl Sagan, but right now, just because I can't come up with anything else, Carl Sagan. You know what? I'm going to leave it there because what made me think about an idea is not going to be the most exciting. If I come up with anything,
if you come up with something, you can send me a message, comment. We can share with people as well. All right. Certainly. So the final question, that's, as you know,
and sadly, I picked all men, didn't I? Crap.
You did. That's right.
Uh-oh. Well, that's going to be pointed out. And all white men. Oh boy. Okay. Well, I got to work on that one. I got to work on that.
Go back to the drawing board. And that's very good self-awareness, right? The fact that you picked up on it, and now you have a data point to be able to do some investigation and see who else you might want to add. That's good. That's real. That's in action, showing people exactly what we've been talking about on this episode.
Yeah. All
right.
I got some things to work on. The
big question: we have another species, an alien intelligent life form, come to our planet. And the first human they meet is you.
Mm-hmm.
What do they get about humanity because they meet you?
Okay, so I'll say this. I really listen. I was born in America. I was born white. I was born with many privileges. I do consider myself more human. Now, this is, I know, sounds really kind of, I don't know, sci-fi. I'm not anti-America. I'm not, but I'm also not anti anything else in the world. I don't think the people in Russia are bad people. I think our governments, both sides, have terrible leaders, or at least people who haven't connected with their emotional intelligence as much as they should. I think if you're asking the question, how would I represent us? I would represent all of us, not America. Absolutely. And basically, I think I would try to convey as much as I can that we have in our discussion today, and let them know how I think, myself included, are all very flawed. We're learning. That's the great thing about us, is that we can change, we can learn. We've gone from single cell organisms to where we are today. That's a hell of a adventure. And if you want to just go back a few hundred years, the ways that we were thinking 200-300 years ago to the way that we are thinking today, we have grown. We have gotten better. We are getting better.
Yes.
My emphasis has just been, are we getting better fast enough to match our technological appetite? I would fight for us and when I say fight, I mean discuss that we are worth keeping. I mean that we are worth exploring, that we are worth talking to. And I would say not to give us all their technology yet. Now, this is a great Star Trek and other sci-fi stories. And I don't want to go too far down this one because we probably don't have time. If they had technology that could save people that are dying from cancer and all these sorts of things, that is a really tough one.
Yeah.
Do we have them come in and solve all our problems for us? I mean, this goes back to the crux of many sci-fi and Star Trek stories.
Yes.
Do we do this, or do we let ourselves suffer so that we can grow and learn how to earn these advancements, these technologies? I usually lean towards, and it's easy for me to say this because I come from a privileged, relatively healthy position, but I do think it's important that we make our mistakes and that we grow and learn from our mistakes. Would I go back and kill Hitler? Well, sure, I'd want to save people, but it made us who we are today. Now, is Roddenberry saying he loves Hitler? No, I'm not saying that. I am not saying that. But if we went back and righted all of our mistakes in humanity, everything that ever went wrong,
yeah,
we would still be living in caves. we wouldn't grow as a species. So I went on a tangent. I would let them know that we're worth saving to introduce themselves to us and share knowledge with us to a degree, but let us kind of grow and learn. And perhaps just meeting them alone would allow us to look at the universe in a different way, because we might realize there's more out there to grow and live for. So.
Beautiful. Well said. Thank you so much, Rod. This has been amazing. We dove into some awesome topics today, and I'm really
Absolutely
just very grateful to have you on the show. And I've had such a wonderful afternoon conversation. I hope that this has been useful for many people. I saw a lot of activity in the comments. A lot of people were really engaged and loving what you were saying and sharing their own comments and feedback. And so thank you to everyone who joined us live as well. Rod, if people would like to learn more about Roddenberry Foundation, what you're doing, what's the best place for them to go and find more information?
Well, I mean, Roddenberry.com is our entertainment side. RoddenberryFoundation.org is our philanthropy side, which I encourage everyone to check out. Very proud of what we're doing in both areas. I don't do too much on social media, but I'm starting to dip my toe in the water on Instagram a little bit. So you can find me there at Eugene Roddenberry Official, which I hope to be getting rid of that official part soon, or Rod Roddenberry.
Okay.
So yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, I do have you tagged on my story on Instagram. So for anyone who might be looking, you can always go to my page as well, Sarah the Pivoter, and you'll be able to link over to Rod and connect. Rod, thank you again so much. It's been such a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for having me. And thank you to everyone out there. And, you know, I've got to do it because this is who I am. I
Yes.
live long and prosper, everyone.
I was waiting for it.
Have to do it. Have to do it.
Live long and prosper. Thank you so much.
Thank you.